Good evening, students. Welcome back to the session. I hope I'm audible and you are able to see the shared screen. So, what about A section students? Are they able to see the screen? You can let me know if there's any issues. Right. So, in our last session, we were discussing about the concept of compilers. We first started with the discussion of the language processing system, right? So, how exactly the language processing system was. But before that, we discussed about the concept of compilers, right? So what do you mean by a compiler? Once again, it's a translator that translates the program in high-level language into a target language, which is basically a machine language or a binary language. So this is how the compiler program can be put in a diagram format. We have a source program that will be supplied as an input to the compiler, and the compiler will produce a target program. And that target program can actually take input and produce the appropriate output. So this is how the compiler actually works. There is a similar program that we had also seen, which is the interpreter, which will take as input the source program along with the input to that particular source program also, and it will produce the output line by line, right? So it basically process the program line by line and produces the output. So this is what the uh, interpreter actually does, right? So not only these two programs, we have got multiple uh, system softwares that also helps us in this regard. Before that, we had also seen that Java, which is a famous programming language, uses both the concept of compilation as well as interpretation. So it basically first translates the program into an intermediate program, which is called as a bytecode, and that bytecode is executed on a virtual machine or interpreted on a virtual machine by taking the input to that particular program. So this basically gives what Java calls it as portability. Right. So there are other system softwares also which we are supposed to look into. Like for example, there is an assembler which will translate the assembly level language code into machine code. Okay, and before that, before the assembler handles the program, there is also a preprocessor, right? So which basically handles all the macro statements that are present in your program. So this will expand your program and generate a expanded format of your program and supply that as an input to your compiler. So the compiler would basically produce the assembly level language code, which is handled by the assembler, and that assembler is going to produce the relocatable machine code. So once done, there are programs which are called as linker and loader, which will handle the next part. Basically, linker will resolve all the external memory address references, and it will link your program with other programs. And of course, the loader is going to load your program into main memory for execution, right? So together, they are called as the language processing system. So this is the diagram that represents the language processing system. So we are all familiar with the softwares that we are talking about, except the topic of compiler. So this is what we are supposed to study. So we also discussed about the structure of the compiler. So I told you that compiler consists of two different phases, or it can be considered as two different parts. The first part is when the compiler is doing the analysis, which is called as the analysis part, which will break up the source program into its constituent pieces and basically performs grammatical checks. And the second part is called as the synthesis, which is going to represent, which is going to produce the intermediate representation, and if possible, the target program, right? Along with optimization, of course. So sometimes the analysis part is called as the front end of the compiler, and it is independent of the machine architecture. And the back end and the synthesis part is called as the back end, okay, which is obviously dependent on the machine architecture. Okay, so how the compiler actually translates your program into target program is basically through several phases, right? These are listed here in the diagram. So we start with the first phase or the first uh, what you can say, okay, phase. We can call it as a phase, right? So it's called as a phase. So first phase of the compiler is the lexical analyzer. The second phase is the syntax analyzer. The third one is the semantic analyzer. The fourth one is the intermediate code generator. Then we have two different set of optimizations, machine independent and machine dependent, along with code generation. And all of these phases are interlinked with a particular data structure, which is the symbol table that will be used by all the phases of the compiler. Now in every phase, there is some sort of input and there is some sort of output produced. Like for example, when you come across the lexical analysis phase, lexical analyzer would take character stream as input and it would produce tokens. Okay, this token is supplied as an input to our syntax analyzer, which is going to produce the syntax tree. So similarly, other phases are going to produce annotated parse tree, intermediate representation, and optimized intermediate representation, target machine code, and optimized target machine code. So like this, there are several inputs that the each phase is going to take, and appropriate output is produced by them. Okay, so we have discussed about this with an example in the last session, how lexical analysis and how syntax analysis is done. For this particular example, this is a statement in high-level language that has been converted to the machine code. Okay, so here is the not machine code, sorry, assembly level language code using the different phases of the compiler. So what exactly happens in each phase to convert this statement into corresponding assembly level language code, we had discussed that in detail. Okay, so now we shall discuss about some of the other aspects related with compiler technology. So basically some sort of introduction, but before that I already mentioned that symbol table is actually used in all the phases of the compiler. It would actually keep track of information related to name, type, scope of the variable, okay, name of the procedures used, the number and type of the arguments, and what is the method that is used to pass the argument. So all that information are going to be recorded in the symbol table. So symbol table becomes one of the important data structure that is used by our compiler, right? And we already talked about how it is implemented, or the data structure that is used to implement it. We are going to make use of the hash data structure so that the retrieval and insertion becomes easier, right? Because it has to be done much more efficiently. So we need a hash data structure in order to implement the symbol table. And sometimes we can group the phases into several passes, because we may have to process some information that is present in the program again and again. So that would be done by grouping together different phases into a passes. Okay. So I was talking about the compiler construction tools before I left the last session. So basically, a compiler construction tool can be used in order to generate different phases of the compiler itself. Okay, like we already have seen that compiler has various phases. So there are certain softwares that you can actually make use of, or there are certain software development environments which can be used in order to develop different phases of the compiler. So these are basically some specialized tools that can be used to implement various phases of the compiler. We are already familiar with two of them, right? So that's what we are been discussing about in the laboratory sessions. So some of the commonly used compiler construction tools are as follows, right? So what are they? First one is the parser generator. Okay, so what's the job of a parser generator? Now, as the name itself indicates, parser. Parser means parsing. So parsing is nothing but performing syntax analysis. Okay, so or a syntax analyzer. I'm talking about syntax analyzer. So there are programs that can actually generate parsers or syntax analyzers, right? So what are parser generators? So these are programs that are going to produce automatically syntax analyzers, provided a grammatical description of a programming language, right? So we have been talking about YAC or syntax analyzer. So syntax analyzers basically require grammar in order to verify the programming construct, right? So if you give the grammar, automatically syntax analyzer is going to be produced. This is the job of the parser generator. One such example of a parser generator is your YAC, which we have already seen in the laboratory sessions. Okay. Now, just like parser generators, we have scanner generators. Okay. Scanner is nothing but Lexer, right? So, which performs lexical analysis. So, we have programs like scanner generators that will produce lexical analysis, but they need something, right? What do they need? They need regular expression, okay, or they need regular expression description for the tokens of a particular language. So, if you give that information, this scanner generator can produce the lexical analyzer or the scanner, right? So one such example for our scanner generator is the Lex. Okay, so example for parser generator is YAC, which we are looking into, and for scanner generator is Lex, which we are also looking into in the laboratory session, right? Then there are syntax directed translation engines. Okay, now this is a particular set of software program that is going to produce collection of routines for walking a parse tree and generating the intermediate code. So this basically falls under the two different phases, which is syntax directed, semantic analysis as well as intermediate code generation. So in between those two, or if you group together those two phases, we are going to get this, or we are going to make use of this syntax directed translation engine in order to produce the intermediate code. So parse tree is produced during the syntax and the semantic analysis. So we will go through this and generate the intermediate code. So this job is done by syntax directed translation engines. Okay. Then there are code generator generators. Okay, so that basically produces a code generator from a collection of rules for translating each operation of the intermediate language into the machine language for the target machine. Okay, so basically this is nothing but generation of target code, or basically a program that will generate the target code given a code from high level language. Okay, then there are data flow engines which are there to gather the information that is required from one part of the program to the other, and this is basically required for performing the optimization. Okay, so we've seen that our compiler has two different places where optimization can be performed. So whatever information is required to perform the optimization, so that is going to be provided by these data flow analysis engine. So basically they analyze how the data flows through your program and performs the optimization if required. Okay. Then last is the compiler construction toolkits itself, right? So these are individual programs from 1 to 5, whatever I have discussed. All of these are individual programs and they work on a particular phase of the compiler. Like for example, the parser generator works on the syntax analysis phase, scanner generator, lexical analysis phase. This works on two phases, so are in between the two phases, intermediate code generation and the semantic analysis. Code generator is part of generating the code or code generation phase, and data flow analysis is in the two different optimization phases, right? So all of these are individual programs and work on a common phase or on a single phase. But compiler construction toolkit, okay, toolkit means what? It's a collection of tools. So there are compiler construction toolkits program that will provide an integrated set of routines for constructing the various phases of compiler, right? So you can have an integrated development environment where we can construct various phases of the compilers together. So this is one more software kit that are available in order to generate your compiler. So these programs would actually make your job easier in order to generate your compiler. That's what. Okay. Now, before going into in-depth detail of how the compiler actually works, let us look into some of the important concepts related with how exactly the compiler technology came into existence, right? So we shall talk about how the languages have evolved over time, right? So we already know that initially all the programs were written in binary. Okay, so basically it was machine language, and machine language is basically a sequence of zeros and ones. So it was basically used earlier from 1940s when the computers were first used. And you know that there are several problems associated with machine language. Like mainly, it is very difficult to analyze the program. If you have a sequence of zeros and ones, how would you analyze a program, right? So that is difficulty. And second thing that is also a problem is debugging. So suppose if a error is there in your program, then how would you debug or how would you detect these particular errors? So that is also a issue. So analyzing the program is difficult with a sequence of zeros and ones. Chances of making mistakes or errors is high, and detecting those errors is also very low. Right, so these are some of the issues with machine language. So with machine language, the issue was not resolved. But however, you should know that the machine language actually is very faster, and it is understood by the machine, right? So then came the move towards the high level languages, right? So we started with mnemonic assembly level languages in 1950s, so 10 years after the binary language was used. So obviously this machine level language or assembly level language used mnemonic representations, which are almost closer to what machine instructions are, and then later they were translated into machine program or binary program, and they were executed, right? But however, you know that assembly level language program also has certain disadvantage. So disadvantage in the sense the assembly level language program were lengthier to write, that is one thing, and it was difficult for us to remember all the instructions, right? So everything or every detail needs to be maintained. And one more major issue was that they are machine dependent, right? So an assembler written for a particular machine or a program that is written for that particular assembler may not run on another machine with some other assembler. So that is one of the major drawback of having an assembly level language program, right? So that actually led to the discovery of high level languages in the later half of 1950s. So some of the higher level languages that surfaced during those period were Fortran, okay, COBOL, Lisp, which are basically used for the following things. Like Fortran was used for scientific computation, COBOL was used for business data processing, and Lisp was actually used for symbolic computation. Right. So all of these are forgotten languages, or not so popular languages. But however, you should know that these languages are still used. Okay, of course, we are not learning it, but these languages are still used, right? So these are some of the languages that surfaced earlier and were very popular during those times, right? But as time moved on, we came up with different types of programming languages, and today we have got thousands of programming languages, right? So they can be classified also. One sort of classification is by the generation, okay? Like for example, first generation languages, we can call them as machine level languages. They belong to that particular generation. Second generation language are the assembly level language programs. So they belong to the second generation. And we can call third generation languages as the high level languages like Fortran, COBOL, Lisp, C, C++, and Java, because they were popular during these times. And we have also come up with even advanced languages. Like for example, they can be considered under the fourth generation. So like programming languages like Nomad, which is used for report generation, even SQL that you have learned in your database, so that can also be considered as a fourth generation language. And PostScript, which is also used for text formatting, that can be considered as a part of the fourth generation. Okay, now advanced language, fifth generation language, are those which apply logic and constraint based languages, like for example Prolong and OPS5. Okay, these are some of the examples of language that can be classified into generations. Now you can also classify the languages into imperative and declarative type. What is the difference? In case of imperative, your program would specify how a computation is to be done, right? For example, if I have to add a number, I need to tell how this number has to be added, right? So that's what an imperative language is. And a declarative language is one that would just specify what computation is to be done. That's it. Okay, remaining thing will be handled by the programming language itself. So this is also one more category that we can put our programming languages in. So imperative language or declarative language. So the languages that we have learned in our engineering, C, C++, C Sharp and Java and all, they are all imperative language, because there we have to specify what has to be done and how it has to be done, right? So that is an imperative language. So other than that, examples for declarative language, which obviously we haven't learned, are ML and Haskell. So they are constraint based languages, and also even Prolog can also be considered as a part of declarative language, right? So this is one more way to categorize your programming language. Now there is a third way also, like you have the von Neumann language. I believe everybody is familiar with the von Neumann concept. So the stored program concept, you might have learned this in C. Okay, so he brought the stored program concept, because of which our high level languages were invented. So even that is one way to categorize your programming language. So any programming language that can store itself and can execute. So all of them come under the category of von Neumann model. Okay, so programming languages like Fortran, C, all of these things are von Neumann languages. And we also have now the concept of object-oriented languages. Like we already are familiar with this, C++, C Sharp, Java, Ruby, all of these are object-oriented languages, because their style of programming basically consists of objects, right? And there are scripting languages also. This is also one more category that you can put programming languages in. So these basically have high level operators that are designed for performing certain computations, right? So basically they were called as scripts, and these languages which are listed here, AWK, of course all these things you might have studied in your Unix programming, Org programming, JavaScript, Perl, PHP, Python, Ruby, TCL, all of these things are popular scripting languages, right? So these are all some of the categories in which you can categorize different languages. So there are so many languages that have been invented, and of course all of these things are having an impact on the compilers. Okay, so obviously all of these are a result of improvement in the compiler technologies, because compilers basically help minimizing the execution overhead of these programs written in this language, right? So they are also responsible for making the high performance computer architecture, and there are other users also which basically we are going to look into, right? So as the programming languages evolved, so the demand for having proper compilers were also generated. Okay, so that is the reason why we shall look into how or what makes a compiler successful under the concept of the science of building a compiler. Okay, so how do you build a compiler? Obviously, there are certain things that we need to look into. Okay, so first thing is, whenever you are building a compiler, you need to ensure that you have a proper model. Okay, so which model is used in compiler design and implementation, right? So several models are required, okay, especially the mathematical models. Okay, and you are supposed to also select certain algorithms that would actually make your compiler much more simple and efficient. So what are these models that we are talking about? So you might have heard about finite state machines, or the automatons, right? So automatons, right? So these things are actually used in compiler design as a mathematical model. Similarly, you might have come across the concept of regular expressions, right? So we are also going to look into regular expressions in lexical analysis, but this is also one of the important things, because all these things are required to identify lexical units in your program, and basically to recognize these lexical units, you are going to make use of finite state machine and regular expressions. Now, one more thing that is important is the context-free grammar, or the CFGs. I think you are also familiar with this concept under automata theory. So this thing is used to describe the syntactic structure of any programming language, right? So all these mathematical models are important. So you need to have the knowledge of these things in order to model something in your compiler. Okay, so this is one of the things that is very, very important. Then comes the part where we are supposed to optimize, because optimization is very, very important to make your code more efficient. Okay, so basically optimization is responsible to produce code that is more efficient than the obvious code. Okay, what does it mean? It means that you have written a program, so what the compiler has to do is it has to ensure that your program runs faster. So whatever program the compiler produces, that should be more efficient than the one that you have actually written. Otherwise, the compiler is not at all useful. If it simply translates your program into a target program without performing some optimization, without making it efficient, then obviously it's not a good output that is produced by the compiler. So this is one of the things that should be guaranteed by the compiler. So whatever code is generated, it should be fast, or it should be faster than the code that performs the same task. So this is one of the things. So optimization is very, very important. So there are certain hacks, and there are certain things that are used by the compiler in order to make your code very, very efficient, right? But whenever you are ensuring that your code is efficient or your code is optimized, then always consider the following parts, or the compiler considers the following parts. So what are they? So these are some of the uh, design objectives that the compiler optimization must meet. So if these objectives are not met, then obviously your compiler is inefficient and it is not producing the desired code. Okay, so what are these design objectives? Let us have a look at. So first thing is that whenever a compiler performs optimization, the optimization must be correct. Okay, like for example, you have written a program. Just a second. Okay, somebody has raised hand. I don't know. So as I was talking about, the optimization must be correct. Okay, so assume that you have written a program to add two numbers. So after compilation, you see a program that is not performing the addition properly. So obviously the optimization has not been done correctly. Okay, or it is producing wrong output, or it is producing invalid results. So the optimization is not correct. Okay, so whenever you do optimization, you should ensure that the optimization must be correct, or in other words, it should preserve the meaning of the compiled program. Okay, so if I have written a program to add two numbers, then whatever code is generated after optimization, that should still do the same. So that is one of the design objectives. Okay. The second design objective is that whatever optimization you perform, that should actually improve the performance of the program. So if it does not improve the performance, then it is not useful. Okay. So this is the second point. The third point is that whatever compilation time is used to perform the optimization, that should be reasonable. Means it should not take more time just to perform optimization. That's it. If you want to produce efficient code, fine, but it should not take more time. The time taken to perform the optimization should be reasonable. So this is the third objective. The fourth objective is that whatever effort you put in, that must be manageable. Okay, so it should not be like you are performing optimization and you are putting in a lot of effort, engineering effort in the sense in terms of time. Okay, so it should not take more time, and it should not appear like we are putting in more effort to convert this program into an optimized program. So these are some of the design objectives that must be kept in mind whenever you are performing the optimization. So using separate mathematical models, reasonable mathematical models to design the compiler, and of course the concentration on optimization with the following design objectives met is one of the major focus whenever you are building a compiler. Okay, so that is one of the things. So one point here to mention, so we know that a compiler is a complex system, so obviously we should keep it as simple to assure that the engineering and the maintenance cost of the compiler is manageable, right? This is corresponding to the last point which I already explained, right? So this is how compiler are actually built, or the concepts that are used in compilers, right? So how the compiler is actually built, obviously we will know in further chapters. But before that, let us look into the applications of compiler technology. Now, whenever I talk about a compiler, one thing that might come into your mind is that this is basically a translator which will translate a source program into target program. But this is not the only application of a compiler. So basically, compiler design has certain concepts that can be used in other areas as well, right? So compiler design is not only about compilers, they can be used in several areas of computer science. Now, what are these areas of compiler design that can be used, right? So in computer science, we're going to look into that, right? So the first application is that the compiler are actually used to implement high-level programming languages. Okay, so we have seen that compiler's job is to basically translate high-level language to machine-level language or assembly-level language. But here it has been mentioned that the compiler itself can be used to implement high-level language, high-level programming language. How? Because the compiler technology gives us enough idea regarding what things can be changed or what things can be implemented in a high-level programming language, right? So how it is done? So if you consider a high-level programming language, then writing high-level language program are easier, but they are basically less efficient. So why we are calling it as less efficient is because they basically run slowly as compared with assembly level language or machine level language. On the other hand, we have low level languages that can produce more efficient code, but the problem is that they are harder to write. Okay, and since they are harder to write, it can be open to less portability and more errors, and basically hard to maintain. So these are some of the issues with low level language, and as a result we went with high level language, right? Now there are certain compilers or there are certain programs which are called as optimizing compilers that include techniques to improve the performance of the generated code, so thus offsetting the inefficiency introduced by the high level abstraction. So whatever high level programming languages defined in a program, they can be optimized by this particular compiler. So they can actually reduce the abstraction and make your code much closer to the low level languages and hence make it much more efficient. So implementing a high level programming language or modifying a high level programming language to make it more efficient is one of the application of the compiler technology. Okay, so one example has been given. I think you might remember this from your C programming language. So earlier there was a programming construct in C called as register. Okay, like for example, you can declare a variable like register int a, and the value of a was actually directly placed in the register. I don't know whether you remember this or not, but earlier it was possible. So that gave the power to the programmer that he can actually place a value directly in the register. So when you can place a value directly in the register, then obviously the execution becomes faster. But that totally becomes a skill of the programmer. How it has to be used and when it has to be used, obviously that becomes the skill of the programmer. So as a result, sometimes it lost efficiency. Okay, because programmers were not the best judge for looking at what matters at the low level, right? So how the register allocation has to be performed. Obviously, they are not the better judge. So obviously, when earlier programming languages were developed, so this particular feature was removed from C programming, and they were actually made as a part of your compilers. Okay, so obviously that is also a part of optimizing compilation, right? So this is one such example which was practically involved in high level languages like C++, C, Fortran, COBOL, etc., and all the compilers actually use certain data flow optimizations to perform these type of activities, right? So this is one thing. And one more thing is with regard to high level programming languages like C++ or C Sharp or Java, which are object oriented, they introduced the concept of data abstraction and inheritance. So even all of these concepts were actually a result of the compiler technology or the enhancements in the compiler technology. Even Java having features, various features like type safe method, okay, and other things that are actually part of Java programming language like portability and mobile code. All of these were actually introduced because of the concept of compiler technology, right? So this is one application where high level language concepts have come into picture because of compiler technology, right? Compiler technology and compiler optimization. So this is one such application of compilers. The second application is for optimization for computer architectures. Okay, so you know that there are different types of architectures present. One such famous architecture is the x86 architecture, which is obviously the machines that we are currently using, right? So there are different types of computer architectures other than the x86, which is existing today, and most of those architectures have been optimized by using compiler technology. Okay, so what are these? So how do they actually optimize? Now they optimize most of the computer architecture by using two basic techniques. What are those basic techniques? One technique is parallelism. The other technique is the memory hierarchy. Now what do you mean by parallelism? So parallelism is nothing but executing or doing something in parallel. Okay, like for example, if you have a program, then you can execute that program, or you have multiple programs and you have multiple processors, you can execute those programs on multiple processors. So that is also one sort of parallelism, right? So when it comes to parallelism, you can achieve parallelism at two different levels. One is at the instruction level, the other one is at the processor level. Okay, now what is the difference? So instruction level parallelism means I have a program and that program contains several instructions. Okay. So if those instructions are executed on different processors, okay, same program's instructions are executed at or on different processors, then that type of parallelism is called as an instruction level parallelism. So instruction level parallelism is one where multiple operations are executed simultaneously. Okay, and then there is a processor level parallelism. Okay, where you have concepts of threads that would actually handle the same application but run on different processors. Okay, so you can have threads which handle different part of the same application, right? So this is also one of the other type of parallelism. So using these techniques you can achieve parallelism. Okay, and when it comes to memory hierarchy, we already know that memory is organized in our computer systems. So like for example, the fastest memory is there to the slowest memory. So fastest memory is the register. Then comes on top of it the cache memory. On top of the cache memory, we have the main memory, obviously, and then after the main memory comes various form of secondary memory or secondary storage, right? So all of these memories are different from each other in terms of their operating speed and their capacity. Okay, like for example, registers have limited storage, like for example, one word or something like that. Cache also has limited storage, right? But when compared with register, cache memory is somewhat slower. Okay, and similarly main memory, obviously we know main memory around 3 GB or 4 GB, 6 GB, 12 GB, whatever the capacity of the machine is. So main memory comprises of that storage, and on top of the main memory we have the which one, secondary storage, which obviously is in terms of GBs or TBs, right? So if you look at the memory organization, you can see that the closer the memory is to the processor, the faster it is. But however, capacity wise, it is less. Okay, like for example, the memory which is closer to the closer to the processor is the register, right? It is faster. Okay, then second is cache. It is slower than register. Then third is main memory. It is slower than the cache. Okay, and secondary storage obviously slower than all of these things. So memory hierarchy is basically or is a response to the limitation that we can build very fast storage or very large storage, but not storage that is both fast as well as large. So obviously each type of memory have their own limitation. So obviously having the knowledge of how exactly memory is organized actually plays an important role in making your computer architecture successful. Okay, so that is where most of the compiler design strategies are actually used in order to optimize your computer architecture. Like for example, when it comes to parallelism, as I was talking about, most of the computer architecture uses these strategies of either having instruction level parallelism or processor level parallelism, where your compilers can actually rearrange the instructions to make instruction level parallelism more effective. Okay, so these compilers can actually rearrange the code inside your program so that it can be executed much more effectively. And there is also one such instruction set that is used in some of the machines, which is called as VLIW, very long instruction word, which basically can issue multiple operations in parallel. Even this is also been made available in some of the computer architectures, right? So when it comes to multiprocessor machines which are existent today, so we have the multi-threaded code for multiprocessors or parallel code. You can write parallel code which can be executed by your machines even though your program is sequential. They will be taken out on multiple processors and executed. So even things like this are happening with the computer architectures. All of these things are actually using the concept of compilers. Okay. Now, when it comes to memory hierarchies, as I already mentioned, knowing how exactly memory is organized is quite important, because using registers effectively is probably the single most important problem in the optimizing problem. And unlike registers that have to be managed explicitly in software, so other memories like cache and physical memories are basically hidden from the programmer, or it will not be available directly to be accessed in the instruction set, and hence has to be managed by the hardware. And this hardware would be programmed by using the compiler strategies. Okay, so basically by changing the layout of the data or by changing the order of the instructions that the data is accessed, so you can actually make your code much more efficient, which is done by using the compiler technology. So this is the second application of compiler technology in developing the computer architecture or optimizing the computer architecture which already exists. The third one is they can be used to design new computer architecture, right? So not only to optimize, sorry. Okay, so not only to optimize the existing computer architecture, compiler technology have also been used to design new ones. Okay, so basically they will exploit some of the features that were non-existent in earlier architectures, and they will come up with new features, right? So compilers are actually developed in computer architectures during the design stage itself, and they are run on those machines, and the performance is evaluated, and based on the performance or the based on the results of the simulations, their architecture is evaluated and modified. So this is how new computer architectures are actually generated. Okay, so basically run programs on your machine and find out how exactly they perform, and based on their performance, whichever is lagging, they can actually make the modifications. So this is how new computer architectures have been evolved. One such example that can be taken in this regard is the uh, evolution of the RISC machines. Okay, so RISC is basically short form for reduced instruction set computer. So this architecture was actually a invention of how compiler technology was actually used to reduce earlier architecture, which was called as CISC, okay, which actually stands for Complex Instruction Set Computer. So as the name itself indicates, reduced instruction set and complex instruction set. So a complex instruction set was capable of performing many operations in a single instructions. So basically it used to include complex memory addressing modes to support data structure access and procedure invocations instructions that save the register and pass the parameter to the stack. So basically they were complex instruction set performing multiple operations or using different kinds of addressing modes. So as a result, writing programs on these machines were very difficult. So they came up with an architecture called as RISC, which stands for Reduced Instruction Set. So a complex instruction was reduced, or it was further broken down into some simple instructions, okay, or reduced instruction set. So this is how a compiler technology was actually came into existence. So compiler optimizations were actually used in this regard to reduce these instructions into a simple operations, and by eliminating the redundancies as it was there in complex instructions. So this is one of the application of compiler technology, and the compilers can use these reductions in order to effectively manage the hardware as well, and in order to perform the optimization as well. Okay? So some of the examples where these used were has been listed here. Of course, not important, but just know that compiler technology can actually be also used to come up with new sort of architecture. Okay, not only that, different types of specialized architectures were also introduced, like for example VLIW, which stands for Very Long Instruction Word Machines. So from there, SIMD, single instruction multiple data, arrays of processors, systolic arrays, multiprocessors, shared memory, multiprocessors with distributed memory. All of these things are specialized architectures. So of course, you will be studying about all of these things in, I believe, seventh semester, or yeah, in seventh semester in a subject called as ACA, Advanced Computer Architecture, where we will also look at these RISC and CISC machines as well. Okay, so just know that in computer architectures and specialized architectures, the concept of compiler technology is used. Okay, then comes program translations. So basically, we saw that a compiler would translate high-level language into a machine language. But there are other ways to do that as well. So a compiler may not only translate high-level language to machine-level language. It can actually also translate different kinds of languages. Like for example, one of the type of translation that is done by the assembler is binary translation. What do you mean by binary translation? You take the binary code or machine code of one machine and analyze it and translate it to a binary code of another machine. So it's a binary to binary translation, not high level to binary. It is a binary to binary translation, right? So this is also done by some of the compilers. So mainly it is done to provide backward compatibility. Now, as I mentioned, backward compatibility means you should be able to run a program that is written on a new version machine onto a machine that is not new, right? So basically something like if I have written a program in SIC bar XC, then that program should be capable of running on SIC standard model. Okay, this is what backward compatibility is, but that is not there in SIC or SIC bar XC. But if it is possible for us to translate its code somehow to the SIC standard model, then we can achieve backward compatibility. So that is basically binary translation. So sometimes compiler technology can be used to do that. Okay, so not only that, it can also be used for hardware synthesis. Okay, means for generating hardware programs. So you know that some of the hardwares are controlled by programs of their own. So in order to perform that, you can also use certain languages in order to write programs for them. Like one of the major languages that are used for hardware design are Verilog and VHDL. I think you might have used these in your ADE. So these languages are actually used to design the hardware. So these hardware are designed using a language called as RTL, or Register Transfer Language. So you write programs in RTL. So basically that will contain descriptions about the gates, logic gates that you are using. And these things are going to be mapped onto the transformers or transistors and eventually to the physical layout. So basically some sort of fabrications are done by making or by writing the programs in this language, in this by using these softwares, using this particular language called as RTL. So even this is also a part of compilers. Okay, or basically uses the compiler technology. Then we have database interpreters, which are also modeled on some sort of optimization that is used in compilers. So mainly we have already studied about SQL, structured query language, so which is a language that is used to search for the things in database. So how they are basically implemented, or how the query gets executed. So obviously that is one of the major concern, because we want our queries to be executed efficiently. So what a compiler actually does for making that happen is that they are interpreted and compiled into certain commands so that the database can be searched efficiently. So this is one more application of using the compiler technology, where your queries are going to be optimized in order to run efficiently. Okay, and not only in queries, it's also used in compiled simulation. Okay, I think you might have heard about simulation, which is basically a technique that is used in many scientific and engineering discipline to understand a phenomenon or to validate a design uh, you can say without practical, okay, or without being practical, right? So many simulations are done on computer machines, which would actually reduce cost and which are much safer to experiment also. So that's why simulation is one of the most popular type of activity that is carried out. But sometimes these simulations can be expensive, right? So you have to run a program. So basically how simulation is done is inputs to a simulator are usually given that would actually include the description of the design and specific input parameter for that particular simulation run. And that is the reason why it might become difficult for you to uh, run the simulation for all the scenarios. So that's why if you want to run the simulation for all the scenarios, simulation can become very, very expensive. Okay. So basically we may need an alternative for that, and for that an alternate is to have a compiled simulation. Okay. Compiled simulation means whatever the scenario is, and for that scenario whatever that input or whatever is required, so all those things are going to be compiled first, and then the simulation is going to be carried out. Okay, so as it has been mentioned here, so instead of writing a simulator that interprets the design, because we know that interpretation is somewhat slower, it is faster to compile the design to produce the machine code that simulates that particular design natively. So we generate a compiled simulation for the same that would actually run much more faster than the interpreter based approach. So this is what a compiled simulation is. So we'll basically produce a compiled version of the simulation and run it, which is much more faster. Okay, so this is also one more application of compiled simulation, right? Now, not only that, in certain software productivity tools, our compilation technology is used. So software productivity are, these are tools which are actually used to improve the performance of your software. Okay, because your software or is nothing but a collection of programs, it can contain several errors which may crash the system. So you should be careful, and you should have performed testing on that particular program before you are deploying that particular software. So obviously to do this, there are certain things that are used by software productivity tools. One such technique that is used by software productivity tools is the data flow analysis. So to locate your errors in your program or in your software, data flow analysis is used. So which can actually locate errors statically, and this data flow analysis can also find errors along the possible execution path. So that is one more advantage of using this data flow analysis engine, and it can also be used for testing as well. Okay, so how exactly your program behaves. So your program's behavior can be tested through data flow analysis technique. Okay, so this is one of the technique that was earlier used in compilers, but now it is also used in certain software development tools or software productivity tools. So this is one of the application, right? The second application of the compiler technology is in type checking. So you know that compiler has a phase called as semantic analysis phase, where it exactly performs type checking, right? So like for example, if you have a statement, and if that statement is equated to something, right? So you need to ensure that they are of proper type. So this type of checking was earlier used in compilers, but now they are also being a part of software productivity tools. So some sort of analysis is done by finding the type errors, by analyzing the flow of the data through the program. And obviously it is also important to perform type checking, because it can also give way to different security holes which are used by hackers. So obviously you should be very careful enough to look into these aspects. So most of the software productivity tools, in order to catch these errors, they make use of the, once again, the data flow analysis and the type checking feature of compiler technology in order to detect these. Okay. And one more security related aspect is the bounds checking, which is not available in certain programming languages. Like for example, in C, there is no provision for boundary checking. Boundary checking in the sense, for example, if I have declared an array of size 10, A of 10, it may not mean that it will stop at 10. Okay, even I can store beyond that. course it is an error, but of course there is a provision for me to use the memory beyond that. So basically this can be considered as a loophole which is used by most of the hackers in order to hack into your program. Okay, so buffer overflow is one of the problem. So if you have a buffer used in your program, and if the boundary of that buffer is not set, then the hacker can actually what you can do is you can increase the size of the buffer and make your program to write data into it. Okay, so when the data is written into it, the hacker is able to look into that particular data, right? So he's looking into your data beyond the storage that you have allocated for your program because of this buffer flow overflow problem. So this is one of the problem that exists in programming languages like C. So boundary checking is one of the feature that was actually introduced to overcome this particular problem. So some of the languages that came later, they use automatic range checking that would actually avoid this particular problem. Like for example, in Java is a famous one which actually uses boundary checking. Okay, and one more concept that is related with Java is the memory management tools. I think you might have heard about automatic garbage collection concept in Java programming language, where it cleans up your memory after your program dies, right? Or after your program terminates. So this concept was also introduced because of compiler technology, or is a concept of compiler technology. Okay, so automatic memory management are used in order to avoid all the memory management errors or avoid memory leaks, which was basically a problem in programming languages like C and C++. So obviously various tools have been developed to help programmers to find memory management errors. So obviously all these things uh, are concepts that are actually taken from the compiler technology. So that's why compilers are not just translators, their concepts are actually used in different kinds of applications. Okay, so these are some of the applications of compilers, right? So I think I need to continue, but we'll stop here. We'll discuss about the other concepts related to compilers in our next session. Okay, don't leave. I will take the attendance. If you do have any doubts, you can actually post them here. Otherwise, I will take the attendance. Wait for a second. Okay, I've taken the attendance. I'll also share the attendance sheet. So do fill that up. And if you have any doubts, then you can contact me. If not, I will see you in the next session. Okay. Thank you, students.